So my name is Guan-Horng Liu. I usually just go by Guan. Right now, I'm a research scientist at FAIR in New York City, and today I'm going to present one of our recent work in NURBS. The title is called "Sampling with Schrödinger Bridge and Adjoint Matching Perspective." So this is a joint work with some of my colleagues in FAIR, including Ricky and Ben from FAIR Chemistry, and two other collaborators from Georgia side, so Jemu and Yongxin. So this is the outline for the talk today. I'm gonna go over what do I meant by sampling problems, and then we're gonna very briefly go over uh, like existing machine learning method for solving the problems, specifically the diffusion sampler. And then I'm gonna talk about like a specific class of diffusion sampler that we call a joint-based sampler. So a diffusion sampler based on adjoint matching, essentially. And then we're gonna finally we'll talk about like our main topic of today, which is the Adjoint Schrödinger Bridge Sampler. This is our recent work that has been accepted to NURBS as an oral presentation. Okay, so the problem that we are interested in is the sampling problems. That doesn't really tell us much because most machine learning problems are kind of sampling problems. So just to be more specific, the sampling problem that we want to solve is really to sample from the Boltzmann distribution. And so like these problem setup is very common in AI for science, uh, based on inference, rare event sampling, molecule simulations, molecular dynamics, and protein physics, and so on. So this distribution is characterized fully by these energy function, which which we assume which we will assume it is differentiable. And then, but like this energy function is, however, unnormalized in the sense that if I integrate over exponential of minus e, it will not necessarily give me one. And so usually we'll need like a normalization constant that I call capital Z here, just to ensure it is a proper distribution. And so like due to the integration over the entire state space, these normalization constant, capital Z, is usually intractable. So like as one of the example of an energy function and also one of the main application for this research project, suppose we are given like a conformer of a specific molecular graph. So you can think of a conformer as a 3D point cloud where each point is labeled with like atom type and charge and some other chemical properties. So if we feed these conformer into some chemical energy function, then it will return a scalar, like say 0.1. So if we have another conformer that is much less structural, then and we feed that into the same energy function, it would output a much higher scalar, say like 100. So in general, we can think of this energy function as if the energy function output a lower value, it means that the conformer has a relatively stabler structure. Therefore, it means that it is more likely to exist in the real world. Or in other words, these conformer appear with a higher probability. And vice versa. So if you have an energy function that output a much higher values, it means that the structure is unstable, it is unlikely to appear. And then from a pure machine learning terminology, it was assigned with low probability. You can also sort of like get these intuition by just playing around with the equation and see that this energy function E is exactly the negative log likelihood. Right. So then we can sort of think of this energy function E as a manifold where the area around a local minimum represent conformers that are more likely to appear with higher probability. And so the problem statement for sampling from these Boltzmann distributions therefore is therefore given given this energy function, capital E, we want to generate samples from the target Boltzmann distribution. All right, so like in terms of method that solve these specific sampling problems, the traditional approaches are MCMC-based method, which is based on the idea of constructing a Markov chain whose stationary distribution is the target distribution. So like these class of methods include a lot of variants, just to name a few. One of the notable ones that might be familiar with most of us is this Langevin dynamics, which consider a stochastic process of the following form. So the equation basically says that starting from some initial point, my SDE is going to evolve by moving along the gradient descent direction of the energy function, which means that I'm moving to find a sample with a higher probability. And then I'm going to add some noise. So I can think of these two terms sort of like an exploitation and exploration. And we know that this dynamic is kind of converges to the target distribution as time goes to infinity. Well, so like one of the few criticisms people usually say about MCMC method is so first it's have a relatively slow mixing rate, and we will see that later in the empirical example where if as your energy barrier goes higher, it's become very soon computationally intractable to not like naively simulate this MCMC dynamics. Second, so like these methods are also not that preferable if the energy evaluation is expensive, because from the dynamics itself, it's implied that we more or less have to query at least one energy evaluation for every propagation. So in light of this, there is a second branch of approaches that rely on like learning-based method to speed up the mixing rate, and also to not needed to carry energy evaluation for every single step. The one that is the focus of the talk today is the diffusion sampler, which can be generally represented as a stochastic process of the following form. So I'm going to introduce more notation here. The small ft here is the prescribed base drift, and the sigma t is the prescribed noise schedule. And then u is our parameterized function, parameterized by theta, that we wish to learn. So like this is the learn control drift. All right, so let us like refactor the problem a little bit. The goal of a diffusion sampler is to learn a control u such that when I simulate these control SDE from some from some source distribution, at terminal time step 1, the marginal distribution of my samples will follow the desired target distribution, which we know only up to an unnormalized energy function E. So just to emphasize this a little bit more, the energy function E is given, meaning that we cannot design it. It is like a part of the problem formulation. Whereas the other component colored by green are things that we can control. So we can design those things. And that include the source distribution, the base drift, and the noise schedule. Now, there has been an exploding number of diffusion sampler since 2023. So shortly after diffusion models came out for generative modeling. So like these are all different methods that try to learn the specific control U. Obviously, I'm not going over all of them, but to my best attempt, we may classify these methods into two classes. So method that was based on like matching method versus method that is not based on matching framework. And to be a little bit more specific, by matching method, I mean that the learning process of this control U is designed such that It is a very simple regression loss. So it's L2 norm over some expectation. Whereas like in contract, the non-matching method usually involves some more complicated backpropagation through the entire computational graph, or you have to rely on some overly complicated expressions on the divergence between the two path managers. And so like we can sort of all agree that from our experience in geometric modeling, uh, having to learn a diffusion model or sampler that rely on matching method is in general more scalable. Now within this class of matching based method, we can further classify them into two categories, which is so namely the score matching or like flow bridge matching, however you want to call that, versus the adjoint matching. So the main difference between these two classes of matching method, at least in terms of sampling from the Boltzmann distribution, is that uh, uh, for score matching, uh, for for score matching and flow bridge matching, it requires sample from the target Boltzmann distribution. And this is not a surprising result because this class of method uh, is initially proposed for generative modeling, which assumes that we have massive data available. But then like these assumptions simply break for Boltzmann distribution sampling because we only know the target distribution through its energy function, not its sample. And so like method design from in this category sort of become a little bit weird in my opinion, because it's kind of like in order to train a diffusion sampler, in order to find these diffusion drift, I need to first generate the target sample, which is the goal of my diffusion sampler. So it become like a chicken and egg. Whereas in contract, adjoint matching is as far as I know, the only matching based method that does not require a target from a target sample from the Boltzmann distribution, and therefore it is very well suited for our problem setup. And so hopefully I have convinced you that within all the method that try to solve these sampling problems, diffusion method based specifically on adjoint matching seems to be the way to go. And and uh, and given that we're gonna dive a little bit deeper into adjoint matching and like some of the technical details. So really, the adjoint matching is a method for solving stochastic optimal controller problems of these following form. So these optimization problems, the objective of this optimization problem consists of two components. The first one is the control cost, the L2 norm of the control cost, or like kinetic energy, however you want to call that. The second term is the terminal cost, which I denoted by the function g. You can also think of that as a negative reward function from the reinforcement learning perspective. And so, uh, sure. And so like given these specific optimization problems, we can apply the result from a joint matching paper, which states that the unique optimal control U star is the fixed point of these variational objectives. So I'm not going over the detail of how these objective is derived, but so like that just treated as it is. So this objective basically says that my control U uh, at any time between t between 0 to 1, it's going to regress onto the gradient of my terminal cost and then weighted by some function phi t. So I'm overly simplify the equation a little bit, but essentially you will have to solve in backward ODE with the terminal condition as gradient of g. And so yeah. uh, putting all these technical detail aside, there are a few things that is more important to notice. First of all, this is a matching objective. So like the training objective is designed such that uh, uh, my diffusion drift is gonna match with some target through some L2 norm and then over some expectation. So these make the learning process much scalable compared to other methods. Second, obviously, like these, the expectation of these regression laws does not depend on the target sample. So we only require a sample from the current model distributions. And then finally, not only do we only require model sample, we don't need to keep the computational graph of these sample. So like I use the notation U bar just to denote that we have a stop gradient of the U, so that so like we don't have to maintain the entire computational graph. So like all of these property together make things scalable, and it is crucial for like scaling up these sampling problems. All right. So in the context of sampling from the Boltzmann distribution specifically, another property of these optimization problems, and perhaps the only reason why we are interested in these optimization problem, is that we also know the the optimal distribution analytically, which is shown in the box here. And so this expression basically says that suppose we solve these SOC problems and obtain its unique minimizer U star, and then we simulate the optimal control distribution. Then the optimal control, the optimal distribution induced by this optimal control U star, it's going to be my base distribution, which I'll define later, tilted exponentially by the target, by the terminal cause, which is the function g here. And the base distribution here is induced by the uncontrolled dynamics. That is the original stochastic process, but without any of the control. And so these and like obviously this base distribution is uniquely defined by the base drift, the noise schedule, and the score distribution. And so basically, at the high level, at the high level, this optimal distribution, it's kind of expected, because it is like saying, if I inject a control U to the stochastic process that is designed to solve the specific L2 norm plus some terminal cause, this objective function, then the resulting distribution, the optimal distribution, would be steered toward the area where G has lower value. Right? And then it will steer in a specific exponential way. Right, okay, so we now have a complete picture of the mathematical framework that we will be working on. Note that at this point, we should really ask ourselves, like why going through all these complications, and how do they really relate to the Boltzmann distribution sampling? And or like in other words, if we were to apply these framework to the sampling problems, the question that we should really ask ourselves is, okay, I have these nice framework that give me analytic optimal distribution. I also know how to solve these function U in a very scalable way. So then the question becomes, how can I design my terminal cause G such that when I marginalize over x0, I'm gonna get the correct target distribution, which is like the problem that we really want to solve, right? And so if we have a G that that satisfy these equality, then we are basically solving for a diffusion sampler where I define a control such that when I simulate the control dynamics at time equal 1, my sample is gonna follow the correct target distribution. So for a reason that I'll explain in the following two slides, this specific condition is actually exactly Schrödinger bridge. All right, so let us dive a little bit deeper how that connects to Schrödinger bridge. And in order to do that, I'm gonna write out the full SOC. I'm gonna write out the full optimal analytic solution. So previously, I used like a proportional just to simplify the notation, but right now we can compute the actual normalization constant, which I call V0 here, and then I'll just write everything in equality form. And then we can introduce tweak the equation a little bit by doing some reparameterization. So I'm going to introduce a new notation that I call phi1 and phi0. So phi1 is really just the exponential of negative terminal cost g. And then you can define psi 0 as the exponential of the negative v0 accordingly. And so like our initial question was how should we design G such that these specific marginal constraint holds. And then by simply substitute these expressions of P star, so with our new functions psi1 and psi0 into this integration. And then by moving everything that only depends on x1 to the left-hand side, specifically these functions psi1, x1. And then we get to like the last equality. And then we can define another two functions, which I call psi hat 0 and psi hat 1. And then we will arrive at these specific equalities. So all the steps here are equivalent, right? And the reason why we kind of go over all these complicated derivation is that like to summarize a little bit, to summarize what we derive a little bit, without changing anything, we deduce that designing a terminal cost G such that these target distribution holds is equivalent to finding a function phi1, which is the exponential of the negative G, such that these four equality holds. And so like just a recap, the second to the last equality is equivalent expressions of our marginal constraint that we want to satisfy. This is what we derived in the previous slide. And then the first equality is really just like a reparameterization or like the redefine of my normalization constant V0 for the optimal solutions. All right. So why this conversion is important is because these four equality is exactly the necessary condition for a Schrödinger bridge. And so by that, and so like the implication is that finding a terminal cost G such that these these marginal target distribution constraint hold is equivalent to finding a Schrödinger bridge, that bridge between, like from the certain distribution to some target distributions. And so these the Schrödinger bridge theory tells us that there is indeed a unique terminal G such that all these equations hold under some minor condition, and then up to some additive constant, which doesn't affect our optimization problems. So one of the theoretical implications of this derivation is that you can sort of think of Schrödinger bridge, which is initially proposed, which is more famous or like more known for its entropic optimal transporter perspective. This Schrödinger bridge is can be thought of equivalently as stochastic optimal control problems. So like they are really the same thing. It's like two sides of the same coin. For stochastic optimal control problems, our optimization problems has a terminal cost G, and by specifying the terminal cost G, it directly imply how the optimal distribution should look like. And then vice versa, for Schrödinger bridge, we do not have these concept of terminal cost, but instead we are given the target distribution by construction, right? So for Schrödinger bridge, we are given the target distribution, and then we can induce and that imply an equivalent terminal cost, and so like we can solve that using the optimal stochastic optimal control framework. Okay, so let us maybe pause a little bit and then just going back to these three boxes here. If like there's one slide that I wish we all kind of take from the talk, that will be the slides here, because I think like these three boxes really highlight the interaction between machine learning, optimization mathematics, and computational methods. So on the right bottom corner, we have the probabilistic characteristic. So like that can come from, like you have some desired property of your machine learning model. It may be like physically inspired, and etc. So like depends on your problems, you may have a different probabilistic characterization. On the top, what we really have is invariational inference problems. And it's just that for this specific case, if I choose the proposal distribution to be the path distribution induced by diffusion model, then these variational inference become an SOC problem. So the stochastic optimal control problem is a specific variational inference when my proposal or my dynamics are diffusion models. And then finally, in the left bottom corner, we have like some scalable computational method. And in this specific case, we are leveraging the fact that for certain type of stochastic control problems, we do know how to solve that relatively scalably using adjoint matching. And then I also want to emphasize like the arrows here. Like given one probabilistic characteristic, there are infinite number of variational inference that a problem that you can formulate in order to solve the same problems. And then like between variational inference and the scalable computational method, the arrow is like double-sided because at least for adjoint matching, because they prove that these matching-based objective will find the exact unique minimizer of the stochastic optimal control problem. So like instead of solving the original variational inference problems, we instead convert the optimization problem into something that is more scalable and then solve it from there. But the solution that we get is equivalent to solving the variational inference problem. It's just like in a more scalable way, and that might like tailor to the diffusion model of your probabilistic models. And so like I want to like emphasize these arrows a little bit because like a lot of people as they sort of like stop once they derive these variational inference problems. And of course you can solve that, and it is an optimization problem, so you can solve that, like brute forcefully propagating through the entire graph. That is for sure a valid method, but in order to scale things up, really like there's additional step that you need to do to convert the problems into something more scalable and then easier to apply. And then by implication, solving these adjoint matching based method in the green box is equivalent to solving a variational inference, and therefore solving approaching that the probabilistic model or characterization that you're interested in. Okay. You can also sort of think of that as like as people uh, uh, like the probabilistic model is going to advance, like like maybe from diffusion model to other type of dynamical system, but then like the diagram here will stay will always remain, right? So like we as the community grows, we will advance the requirement or the model that we use, and then we can always have these personal inference problems, but then there will always be a need to develop some more scalable method to solve the same problems. That's the things that I want to emphasize. All right. So finally, uh, to our uh, main component of today's talk. So that like given these three diagram, it's finally ready to introduce these adjoint Schrödinger Bridge sampler. Uh, so the probabilistic characteristic that we have is the same as SOC, but then like through all these derivation in the previous slide with Schrödinger Bridge, we identified that the terminal cos G that we really need is given by is highlighted in the orange, whereas like psi hat one is like that complicated function that we derived uh, 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 previously. So if we substitute these like terminals G into our original stochastic control problems, this is what we get on the top. For people that are more familiar with how Schrödinger Bridge initially was defined, so this is how Schrödinger Bridge was defined uh, uh, traditionally. So like we have a distributional boundary constraint on the source and target distribution, and we are minimizing the L2 norm of the control, which is the KL divergence. And so now through this framework, we convert Schrödinger Bridge into a little bit like a slightly different optimization problems using stochastic control, which is easier to solve because through this adjoint matching method. So finally, we can apply the adjoint matching framework to derive the actual training method, and which is highlighted in the blue box here. One thing we want to notice is that this function log psi hat is actually intractable, and but fortunately, the gradient of the log psi hat, and I'm skipping a lot of detail here, but the gradient of the log psi hat can actually also be solved with some matching based method, and which is shown in the green box. So like these come from some Schrödinger bridge theory, like some existing Schrödinger bridge theory, but I'm not going to go over the detail. But essentially, what we have here is that like it is still a scalable matching objective, and it require only detach a model sample. So we retain exactly like we retain all the property that that we want to solve these Boltzmann distribution sampling problems.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes.
The intractable part. I'm so sorry. Apologies that I missed this. Why is that intractable exactly?
So it is intractable because this is the formal definition of that. So like there are a lot of like integration that yeah. So like it is intractable due to all these integrations.
So okay. So it's just difficult.
Yeah, I mean you could approximate that, but that is we're looking for something that might work a little bit better, and so like maybe one of the caveat here is like the log psi hat is intractable, but the gradient of log psi hat is actually it has some variational form that we can leverage to like in the learning method. So in practice, because we know that this gradient of log psi hat is exactly the minimizer of another matching objective, we can like parameterize these as a whole with a neural network, and then like this edge will be the neural network, and then this is tractable target, and then we just do the regression loss. So in practice, we will learn this gradient of log psi hat and then plug it into our adjoint matching objective. And so like we're gonna do that alternatively. So like we have the current control U, and then we learn the gradient of log psi hat based on that, and then use that to update our control, which will generate the new sample, and then use those sample to update the gradient of log psi hat. So we're gonna do that alternatively, and then there are some more very non-trivial theory, but we can actually show that these kind of alternate process, if you do everything correctly, it's gonna convert to the Schrödinger bridge solution. So like these two optimization problems corresponds to the iterative proportional fitting, if you are familiar with Schrödinger bridge, but it's like a classical method for Schrödinger bridge that has some nice convergence guarantee. And we are kind of exactly doing the same things here. But like no, it's like yeah. All right, so uh, that's the very brief summary of the method, and then it's now to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the empirical in, the empirical result. So here here we have like a very simple 1D toy example where all the source distributions are 1D Gaussian in the bottom, shown in green histogram. Then the target distribution is like the contour on the top, the purple contour, and then the histogram is the model sample at time equal 1. So the histogram of the model sample, the purple histogram is the distribution, the empirical distribution of the model samples. On the leftmost plot, you see that this is like a standard standard baseline that rely on like some that they call mirrorless SOC, which require inject a lot of noise into the process. If we remove those noise, which lead to the middle plot, you get a bias distribution. So your model sample is not going to recover the target distribution. And then finally, on the right is our ASBS method, which like along our derivation, we have no requirement on how like how many noise we should inject into the process. So like all of those are kind of design choice that we can freely design, depends on your problems, or like maybe you have some inductive bias or you have some heuristic on the problem that you want to solve, like like maybe using less noise or more noise might be better. It doesn't matter for ASBS. Everything will be corrected through like the second algorithm that we shown in the previous slide. We apply ASBS to multiple multi-particle system. So those are like standard benchmark for diffusion sampler, including like manual, double L, and linear join 13 and 55. And then like we see that the ASBS indeed perform much better than all the prior diffusion sampler. So you can see like in the right bottom corner that the empirical the energy distribution generated by ASBS, it pretty much match exactly the ground truth reference sample. And also you can also see on the right corner that we are order of magnitude more efficient in terms of the number of function evaluation that we need to query the energy function, and also to carry the model for simulate the dynamics. We also apply ASBS to some large scale amortized conformer generation. So for these specific problems, our target distribution is given by the equation here, where G is some graph structure, and then tau is like the temperature. And by setting tau to be extremely small, we are really looking for all the local minimum of like these energy landscape quantify characterized by E. And like this is like the how they use to find the conformer that I introduced in the first few slides. So here is the result on like two test sets. So all of these are on Sin's molecule, on Sin's molecule graph, and then we generate the conformer using our ASBS diffusion sampler. And so like you can, and so like these last three rows are essentially like some ablation study using different source distribution. So adjoint sampling AS is a prior diffusion sampler baseline that use a direct delta. So like all the like regardless of how the graph structure, they all start from direct delta. Uh, and that was kind of due to these concern is because they like by then they don't know how to handle a more flexible source distribution. But for ASBS, because we have like again like we have no constraint on all these perspective uh, 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 sources, so we can kind of play around with like say Gaussian distribution or like a more physically informed harmonic prior, which is common for like these chemical problems. And we do see that by using the harmonic prior, it's improved. It's got like the best performance across most benchmark. So here is an example of how the diffusion sampler evolve all these point cloud from the harmonic prior to final. We also experience ASVs on like uh, the more realistic Boltzmann distribution. So here is like a molecule. It's called alumni dipipeline. So it's at like 22 atoms. So basically, we take its energy and then we learn a diffusion sampler using ASBS, and then like we take the sample, the direct sample, we compute the 5 torsion angle, which are something that like chemistry care more about. And then we compare it to the ground truth marginal distribution, which is simulated using like a more expensive molecular dynamics. So here are like the quantitative and the qualitative results. So you can see that for this is the actual ground truth distribution like on these two torsion angle. It's like a multi-model multi-model distribution. They have like multiple modes. For ASBS, we are sort of like able to find most modes, but there are still like missing a few modes in the middle here, which we can actually improve by adding more chemical-based exploration. So this is a follow-up work from my colleagues in ferrochemistry, and then they were able to show that by just adding a little bit of a chemistry-based exploration modes and then devise that accordingly, we do recover the two like lower density mode that was previously missing in the previous slides. And then you can apply, like you can apply the method to something, like more fancier by sampling from the reactive landscape of, the reaction of the chemistry process. As so, like here is we simulate a transition state. We simulate the we can successfully recover the energy landscape of an energy of a chemistry reaction process, and then identify the transition state, which stands for TS. Whereas like the here is something more complicated. So it's called like the bifurcation, which is like like the reactor will jump from 3 to 4, and then sometimes it will cross again to 5. So and then finally, we also have some extensions on extending the whole framework to functional space, so that we can sample not only just a single conformer, but instead a sequence, a trajectory of conformer, and that will be useful in like you want to do transition path sampling. So here's an example of like a protein folding. It's a small protein folding, but we are able to show that the method does have the potential to scale to more complicated problems. All right, so this is my final slide. So I'm gonna stop here and to highlight again like these three boxes that I mentioned. We have a lot of and then I list all the reference paper here, whereas today's talk mainly focus on the second reference, which which I'm also gonna present next week in NERD. And then yeah, so like we just released the code yesterday, so feel free to have a look and then like on our codes, and all the slide and paper are all archived. That will be the end of my talk, and I'm happy to take questions.